Hey, today we have good and bad news. The good news is about Arrowhead. They've dropped plans and answered questions about vehicles and much more. The bad news is about the Terminids and how they've taken over a sector and now are attacking a different planet, and there's so much more I'll be covering. If you would like to support the channel, consider tapping the like button by hitting the thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on the daily news. Alrighty, I'm back again to deliver some Helldivers 2 news. Yesterday I was going to drop this video, but decided to take a small break. That aside, let's start off with the good news about Arrowhead. The Chief Executive Officer Shams Jorjani dropped details about adding a mod section to Helldivers 2, similar to what we've seen from Bethesda with Fallout and Starfield. We can see a post here on the official Helldivers 2 Discord where the CEO wrote that he has been trying to get modding higher on the agenda, but it's slow going, and it's a big task for them to get it added. Then a Helldiver saw what Shams posted and replied, asking if it's going to be a mod support or a workshop. In response, the CEO wasn't specific about it, but said yeah. However, he also stated that there's so much other fun stuff to make. Looks like Shams personally has been trying to get mod support added into the game. We don't know if it's going to be for PlayStation as well, and not just mod support for PC. Now, let's say if they were to fully go through with modding, I think the best approach would to make it accessible for both systems, PC, and console. If you look at games like Fallout 4, for example, that game still has players coming back just for modding alone, and that's both for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Of course, Helldivers is not available on Xbox, but we're just taking a look at PC and PlayStation specifically. But anyways, if Arrowhead were to do the same thing, I have a feeling they would see similar results, and I suspect players would come back to mod the game for fun and do it frequently. What do you all think about modding for Helldivers 2? Would you like to see it or not? Post a comment below and let's talk about it. Next up, we've got a question and an answer about a shooting range. First, the conversation started when Shams replied to a player. He brought up how the Arrowhead team took a regular Swedish holiday break that lasted from December 21st to January 6th. Yet some of the crew at Arrowhead were on call, and that Tuesday was the first day for most of them. He also stated that a bunch of the devs returned on Monday. The conversation continued with another player talking about how games from Nordic countries are good. Shams basically said there's a lot of engineers and that long dark winters make for creative people. A moderator on the Helldivers 2 Discord asked a great question, responded to that post. This moderator wanted to know if they have any plans for a sandbox mode that wouldn't include any influence on the Galactic war map. Shams wrote back and specifically said this: sounds neat, maybe, but it's pretty low prio compared to all the other juicy stuff we've got planned, but something smaller might be more feasible, a gun range? A Helldiver saw this response and recommended that the developers do something with Mars so we can land on the planet at any given time to test out stratagems, loadouts, and vehicles. Shams essentially replied back that he thinks the idea was to have it on the ship. What I suggested a while back was to add some sort of simulator to the ship. When you walk in, it's a decently large room that has a simulation system where you can spawn in enemies like groups of Terminids. However, medium to larger enemies like Palatines, Behemoths, Factory Striders, and so on should only allow you to spawn one. Now I'm sure some of you are thinking, wait a minute Glitch, why would we just want one? What's the reason? The reason why, I believe it could be overwhelming for the engine if you were to spawn in so much in a large room, but hey, maybe I'm wrong about that, maybe it won't be like that, and the developers will allow us to spawn in more than just one larger enemy. Although I think one would be suffice considering you're testing out a weapon. You guys can let me know what you think about this and if you have any good ideas on what the Arrowhead team could do. Moving along, we have a great question that was asked. We have a moderator that asked whether or not Shams knows a lot about the upcoming movie. The CEO said that there's some that he knows about and that they keep the team in the loop. We know recently from a previous video of mine that Pillistead responded to a similar question about the movie on X. A player wanted to know if they're involved in the movie to ensure that it's faithful to the games. Pillistead stated that the short answer is yes, but we'll see, and that they're not Hollywood people and shouldn't have the final say. Overall, so far it seems that Arrowhead is involved, but we'll see if the trailer turns out to be good or not. Personally, my feelings about it, I'm remaining optimistic. I've said this before in the comments below that I don't have any negative feelings about it, and I'm waiting to see how the trailer turns out. Besides my personal feelings about it, Shams also mentioned this to a player and said, "We're all hoping for as many A-list actors as possible, as long as they all get killed violently immediately." I believe I saw a comment from a previous video of mine where someone mentioned that they'd rather have it so that the actors in it are taken out quickly just to reveal the true Helldivers in the movie. All in all, I like the idea. Okay, the next question is about a fourth faction. A player asked about that and said, "Are we getting a fourth faction, or would there be engine limitations?" The CEO gave a response about it and basically said that he doesn't think there's any engine limitations per se, but instead there's a limit to how many elements can be active on the map at the same time due to performance constraints. This means you can't have a bunch of enemies spawn on the map like how in Space Marine 2 there's just a ton of enemies. So in that regard, there are limits to how much can happen simultaneously. Nonetheless, a Helldiver saw that post and said in theory they can jam 50 Bile Titans all at once, and in response, Shams wrote, "I don't know if a Bile Titan needs more bandwidth than any other Terminid, but the more SFX, animation, textures, etc. an enemy takes, the tougher for performance." Well, it appears that we won't see an increased amount of enemies on the map all at the same time, considering what he just said. If there's too much going on, for instance, if there's a lot of Bile Titans on the map, it will be tougher for the game to run because of all these sound effects, special effects, and all that stuff, which makes a lot of sense. Now sure, if they were able to update the engine or work on it a little bit more, perhaps they could increase the number of enemies, as well as give us an 8-player lobby. This is definitely possible. Moving onwards, what you can see is that we have a question about takedowns. A takedown, for those wondering, is basically a special animation to finish an enemy. This player questioned if it's possible we'll see that in the near future. Shams at first was confused about what the player was inquiring about until another Helldiver came along and explained what the first Helldiver was talking about. In response, Shams replied with this, "No idea, haven't spoken to the designers on this, but it sounds a bit too gamey for us. I mean, we want people to do actual takedowns, people do it already, jetpacking on top of a Bile Titan and killing it." This answer isn't a no, technically, yet at the same time, this doesn't appear to be in their plans or something they want to do. I personally would love to see special takedowns for taking down Bile Titans, or a special takedown to take out smaller enemy types like a Brood Commander. On a different note, we could see the missions evolve in the near future. The CEO Shams talked about missions when a player brought up a question, essentially asking if the team is planning on bringing back raid-like enemies from Helldivers 1. Shams doesn't have an idea, but he replied back to that member stating, "No idea on the specifics, but generally speaking, we're looking for ways to make missions more dynamic and varied. If we did something in HD1 and it worked, was well liked, it's a strong indicator we'll explore it again." We can tell from that response, the team is looking into adding more variety to missions. This is something we knew about previously, but it looks like he's doubling down on it. So the missions should be a lot different at some point down the road. We just have to let the Arrowhead team cook, and eventually we'll find out what they're going to do. Speaking of missions, do you have any mission ideas? If so, post a response below. Since we just got done talking about missions, what about difficulty? Do the developers have any plans to handle higher difficulties? This member here asked about it, and the response that player got back is that there's no word. If I see any news about this specifically, I'll be sure to update you all in a future video about it. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and give this video a thumbs up by tapping the like button below. That way you won't miss out on the daily news. Let's now talk about weapons specifically. A Helldiver inquired about bows, asking if it's possible we'll see them in the game. So in response, Shams said that he hasn't seen any plans for the bow as far as he knows, but he would be surprised if we didn't see one at some point. The only thing about that, I'm not sure how this would work, right? Would it have to be an explosive bow, like how we have an explosive crossbow? I just can't imagine a bow being powerful enough to pierce through an automaton's armor. But hey, you can let me know your ideas on this if you have any. Nevertheless, we have some more news, but this time about merch, specifically about capes and helmets. We have a Helldiver that asked the CEO about it, and in response, Shams stated that it's being worked on, and that's in the pipeline. We could very well see merch sooner or later this year, because I can't imagine this would be extended out for another year, so I'm suspecting we'll see merch this year. I could be wrong, but that's my prediction. On a side note, I do want to bring this up right here. So there's a player that brought up how there's some memory leaks. I believe that's what he's talking about with the anti-cheat and how it eats up the CPU like it's nothing. In response, Shams basically said, "Good question," but he needs to talk about it with the team or just bring it up next week. We'll see what happens with that, and once I find out more about that, I'll be sure to update you guys on that. We're now heading towards the final question from a Helldiver here that asks if we'll see vehicles from the first Galactic War. Shams asked the same Helldiver, which one do we want? Most of the answers were about motorcycles, one mentioned dirt bikes, and all Shams had to say that he's hearing a lot about bikes. Now, does that answer mean we're going to see bikes? No, this isn't confirmation that we're going to see a bike stratagem next. However, at the same time, Arrowhead has done a phenomenal job at listening to the feedback and responding to it, so I wouldn't doubt it if we saw motorcycles or a bike in a future patch. Next, we have the bad news. We can tell that on the Galactic War map that Secundus has been taken over. The bugs have expanded their territory, yet even if that's the case, it's only one planet. Nevertheless, it's not good because they can now head over to a nearby planet and attack it within the same sector. We have to be careful about what we do next in terms of defending. Right now, they're attacking Heath, and it looks like we're going to lose it, as you can tell right here on the Helldivers 2 companion app. We have a loadout called the Blitz Commando from the Lone Hunter 6025, and this right here is an interesting one. We are going to be using the Breaker Incendiary, which is just great on bugs, and you can use the supply pack to refill your ammo, so even if they did nerf it a couple of months back, it's still useful, especially with the supply pack. We've also got the grenade pistol for blowing up bug holes and groups of enemies. There's the incendiary impact grenade that's also just amazing on the bugs. And we've got the railgun, supply pack, orbital napalm barrage, and orbital airburst strike or a machine gun sentry depending on the mission. And overall, a very, very solid loadout because the orbital napalm barrage just does wonders on groups of enemies. And the orbital airburst strike is also another one that's good to combine together with the napalm barrage, and the railgun for just taking out larger enemies. Overall, a 5-star loadout because I don't usually see a lot of people using the Breaker Incendiary anymore, so I think that right there makes it unique. Plus, all the other stratagems are just great to combine together. With all the information being said in today's video, this is your Helldivers 2 News. We're now going to check out the top 3 comments. The first top comment is from Diabeto. By the time you're watching this, me watching it 19 minutes after release. Yeah, I know. Hey, you know what? It's always good to include that in the video because you never know when you guys are going to watch this, so it might just be like, you know, an hour or even like 24 hours after the video's live. So I just like to include that. The second top comment is from DossiePoo123. The tallest children is absolutely wild. Indeed it is, my friend. Indeed it is. And you know what? Those children better use stilts or something, right? The last and final top comment is from SpyKitty358. I love the siege passive, but hate how it doesn't come in medium armor. H should always add one of each armor class so they don't leave out dedicated armor types. There's actually an answer as to why they didn't include a medium armor type last time is because it's basically about how they're experimenting with the war bonds and the shop items. So that's the only reason why. Those right there are the top 3 comments. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Make sure you're always giving the video a like. It truly helps out the channel. And also, when you subscribe and turn on notifications, that also helps out a lot. If you didn't know, all of that is completely free and you won't get charged. It's honestly the freest thing you can do on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.